everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Experts in Sustainability. This week we are going over to the Ukraine. Anna, could you introduce yourself? Welcome.
Hi, Justin. Thanks so much for having me. It's really a big pleasure for me to speak on your channel and to represent a little bit this part of the world, as you say, over the pond. So my name is Anna Chashchyna. I was born in Ukraine, and this is where I am now after completing my studies in Europe, in France mostly. So now I'm back in Ukraine trying to introduce sustainability to this very new country to sustainability. It's not easy at all. So what I'm doing, I'm working in the field of environmental and social risk assessment. I prepare management plans for big infrastructure projects for them to manage their environmental, social, we can call it altogether sustainability goals in a proper way. And because most of these projects are introduced in the country due to the lenders' money, and the lenders are usually big financial institutions like EBRD, European Investment Bank, and so on and so forth. The project owners have to follow very specific standards, policies, requirements, and so on. And so I'm being usually that link between the project and the lenders, understanding and translating the language of bankers to the project owners and backwards. So that's a little bit of what I do. In my spare time, I'm hosting a podcast that is called Sustainability Explored, where every week, without interruptions, I interview experts in sustainability and try to kind of offer a view of how sustainability is and how is it represented in various industries. So in various sectors of economy, what it means exactly to be sustainable.
Excellent. And I do want to get on this whole investment thing shortly, but before we get to that, could you give us your definition of sustainability, and could you also give us your top two SDGs?
Sure. Well, I want to be original, but in reality, the sustainability term that I keep in my head is the integration and friendly coexistence, overlapping coexistence of three pillars, which is people, planet, and prosperity, that some also call profit. Last year on my project, on my podcast, I had a person who introduced to me the fourth pillar, and which I think is very interesting. It's called principles. So for me now, sustainability is about four big pillars: people, planet, profitability, and principles. You may also call it ethics. About my two top sustainability development goals, that's a very interesting question. I am a big believer in education. I consider myself an educator, and this is how my podcast kind of plays in.
Absolutely.
And number two is food security, which is very unusual. I do nothing related to food per se in my professional life, but I start feeling it's gonna become a big issue in the coming years. So vertical gardens, ability to grow your own food, in your own little apartment, or if you're more advanced or lucky, even in your little garden, in case you're living in a private house, that's going to be very handy.
Okay, so expand on that food one? I wasn't expecting that one. Normally, I can pull out the two from the people I interview, but that one caught me by surprise. So could you expand on that one a little bit?
Well, I will start a little bit far away. Last year, kind of in December 2020, I interviewed the owner and co-founder of Eden Green Technologies. It's a vertical farming business. I think they are based in California. It would be probably very safe to say they are based in California. Eddie Badrina.
Fair enough.
He introduced to me this whole new concept of hydroponics, the greenery that grows not needing the soil. So it only grows using the little bit of water on those vertical stands. So very little space. It takes very little kind of land space. It takes zero soil, and it grows in the greenhouses. And since we spoke about that with Eddie, I started looking into that more and more, and I was like, wow. Then I think there was a Netflix documentary where I learned that South Africa went through water crisis. And I think it was very much, or it will be logically, very much related to the availability of food, also climate change, the changing of land properties, of soil properties, of even availability of the land. I believe will be changing, and so it's pressuring. It speaks to me more than, for example, oceans issue, or even the whole water security, water issue, because food is so vital. Everything is vital, but you have
Right.
to, well, you
We
have
we
to
we
choose
have to have
something.
food, right? Yeah.
I
So
am afraid so, yeah.
so so that fourth pillar, the fourth pillar of ethics, could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, from what I know, from what I learned from Dr. Kumar Iyer, and I always want to say this podcast, I will be referring it, my podcast and my guests, I will be referring it in this conversation. And I do so in every conversation, literally, that I have, because having a podcast, and I think you will agree with me on that, is like having a window to the world, regardless of
Absolutely.
where you are in the world, where you're sitting, big village, big city, or a small town, whatever it is. Having this ability to interview different people from everywhere, from all walks of life, everywhere geographically speaking, it's priceless. So I interviewed Dr. Kumar Iyer from India on my podcast. I will use his words to explain this fourth pillar, which is principles. So what he said was, imagine you have a big corporation, international corporation like McDonald's. Why the workers maternity leaves, I don't know, vacations, pay, etc. Well, pay I can understand a little bit in India are different from those in, say, Sweden. So why are we basing basic rules on the rules of the country? If we're talking about international corporation, wouldn't it be fair and more kind of, I'm blanking on the word, like, yeah, more fair and more appropriate to have the same rules, because corporations, especially multi-international corporations, are now like states in themselves, like little countries. So their rules have to be applied equally in the US, in Sweden, and in India. So the example he was giving me about, McDonald's was, how is Indian worker in McDonald's following the same rules, same procedures, same technological map of producing whatsoever products are different from those living in Sweden? And there he kind of introduced the principles as a whole different fourth pillar, ethics. So it's not enough, and it's true. I start noticing it all around. It's not enough to only focus on, okay, prosperity. It's the economical aspect. Every project is lucrative. Every project is commercial, unless we're talking about charities and like NGOs. That's something else. Every project wants to be economically viable. Every investor wants return on investment and profit. So that's kind of a basis. Environmental aspect, the same. It's not enough anymore to say, well, look, We are taking care of the environment. We are not killing the birds and the rest of biodiversity when we are building the roads or wind farms or whatever else. And the social aspect, I think principles kind of stick together with the social aspect, and yet it calls for more philosophical understanding of, why we're here. It's not okay to bully. It's not okay to have different rules for different people in different countries. It calls for something more, for something like a higher purpose. I don't know how to really put it into beautiful words, but
Yeah.
you get what I mean.
Yeah, I get exactly what you mean, and I have these discussions often on the ethical principles of organizations and things like that. But it all boils down to doing what's right. It boils down to doing what's right and just being human, right? And
Absolutely.
we talk about this in graduate programs, but if you peel back the onion, that's all it amounts to. It's like, why do you make it? Why do you make it so complicated?
I want to give
Just
you
take the money out of it, and boom, there you go.
I want to give you a completely irrelated example, very fresh as of today. I was thinking, well, Corona did not, the whole COVID-19 thing, I never attended a good concert, even though it was in my bucket list. And then I realized the latest concert I attended was probably end or mid 2019. We had Enrique Iglesias here in Kiev. And it's not the first time, it was probably my last drop. But I finally noticed and I realized that the concerts I attend in the European Union, so say Germany, Czech Republic, Belgium, you name it, are very different in terms of energy and of what artists allow themselves than the concert I attend here. I would be very close if I say disrespect. So he was like 2.5 hours late, not using, not not singing with his own voice. Sometimes I heard there was a little bit of technological help,
Okay.
all of that. So this is what I mean, and this is that example of India versus Sweden or any other country. It's the same. It's a little bit lack of respect when the artist is coming here, like, oh, these people, they will eat anything, so I will give them not my 100%, but 50% will be good enough, for them. They will not tell the difference. And then you attend the same concert in Germany, and the artist is not late, the artist is using his own voice, the artist is there 100% with all the energy, and you're like, hey, it's the same artist, but
Right.
why did I get that crap?
Yeah. Yeah.
So a little bit of an artistic example, but it's about that. It's about respect. It's about being human in all the sense,
Right.
principles and ethics. Yeah.
Yeah. I never thought of it that way. That was an interesting concept. And you get that within the industry all the time, where organizations treat their their platinum clients, roll the carpet out, right? For my small and medium
Hmm.
companies, yeah, what do you want?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
answer your question. But the thing, I think that that leads us into this whole of how you actually got into sustainability and with the investors and things like that came in,
Hmm.
because we're just now talking about that in the US. Is that something that's been new within your region?
Very much so, I would say. So I my way started, it was a bumpy road. I was working, always working since I can remember myself, since I reached legal age of working. I immediately started working in the events. I loved the industry. I loved big openings, the stadiums and ceremonies, and yet I was observing un- unlawful amounts of waste. So, for example, you have a ceremony like opening of the Olympics, and all those dancers and volunteers, their costumes only live as long as the show lives. Then it's all discarded. I was paying attention. I was like, oh my God, the meals that we were feeding the volunteers, a lot of plastic packaging, the costumes, this, that, everything is, like a butterfly. It would live only one day and then it's discarded, it's waste. I decided to study environmental science. I did my bachelor in Kiev. Throughout all that time, I realized that there must be something else. There must be something bigger, something more. Our professors, back to that example of workers and artists working here, they all count on people that don't know what else is possible. So if you're happy with 50% and you just don't know that 100% is possible even. This was the case of my studies here in Ukraine, but I sensed there was something bigger. So I did my master's I did Erasmus Mundus, a 2 years master's, so 4 universities in partnership that allowed me to see all different perspectives of, ecotoxicology, biodiversity, legal aspects, and so on and so forth. And then for like a year and a half, I couldn't find a job in France. I was in Nice. It was not at all the region to work in the environmental sector, because it's either tourism, a lot of tourism, or Cannes Festival, so film and artistry and so on. But that's basically it. People only come there to relax and spend beautiful days by the beach. So I decided to go back to Ukraine, again, knowing nothing, having my European degree. I even had to relearn the language. I know how weird it sounds, but my parents thought I was showing off, speaking the mix of English and French and a little bit of Russian and Ukrainian. I was like, I swear it's not. It just takes a little bit of time to to get back to it. And then I think a lot of chance played its role. I just found a job. So one of the banks here, one of the Ukrainian state-owned banks, was looking for an environmentalist. I thought, how weird is that? Bank, finance, economy, and the environment, like why? I was very curious and I did not hide my excitement and curiosity. I showed up, they called me, I applied, they called me, and it turned out that, and here where the story gets very interesting, one of the 5 branches of the World Bank that is working in Ukraine, that is called International Finance Corporation, or IFC for short, chose that bank to make a green institution out of it. So the term of a green bank is a little bit more complicated than what I'm going to say, but for simplicity, it's a financial institution on the local level that gives loans to energy efficiency and alternative energy projects. In Ukraine, especially alternative energy kind of notion became very important right after Russian occupation of the eastern parts of Ukraine and Crimea. So the big governmental idea was like, we have to do everything that is in our hands not to depend on Russian gas. So we simply had to develop our own alternative energy projects. Wind, solar, hydro, even though that's not at all popular, luckily in Ukraine, because of the climate change and the rivers and the mountains, so it's not anymore in the picture. So there was supposed to be a bank that had to deal with only those projects that were developing alternative energy and energy efficiency for the sake of kind of economical and energy independence. And for that, because IFC and because World Bank have their own environmental and social policies, and they work following the certain certain standards, performance standards, certain very specific guidelines that they reinforce with every client of theirs, they had to make sure there will be a person inside of that institution that would take care of the whole building up of the whole environmental and social system. So someone who would say, okay, and again, there was a crisis of 2008 when everything collapsed, when we realized here on the local level that the loans that were given were not sustainable at all. So a lot of money did not return, obviously. No one wanted to close their eyes to the risk assessment, or else it's called in the banking sector underwriting. But there is financial underwriting, and no one also wanted to close anymore their eyes on the social and environmental aspects. For example, no one in the clear mind and good memory will voluntarily issue a loan to a project that we know of, that the community is super against it, and there is a big chance that the project will not be built, or will not be released, so to say. So there I was. I started developing the system. At the same time, I was writing that internal policy, writing the manual of how we will assess and what kind of projects, and how to connect the legal department with the business department, with the financial risk department, and where my department, environmental and social one, jumps in. It was an insane time. It was so fast. It was just 3 years, but it was so compressed, so focused, so interesting, and so enriching. It just fascinates me then that sometimes I see job posts that say, I don't know, minimum 10 years of experience. It just makes me laugh, because you can spend 10 years sitting in the chair, and you can spend 2 or 3 years that would account for good 15 years of productivity
Right.
and actual results. Not at all. This is it's not at all something that is very developed in Ukraine. It's only so far with the banks, big banks, as I said, international financial institutions. And they say, like, least of all, we want to ruin our reputation. We don't want to see one day in the newspapers that, the bank X is killing biodiversity in the country Y. Reputationally, financially, it all makes sense, but it's going to take a while until it becomes a regular routine, something that everybody will be doing.
Right. Now, during that time, did you see any situations with greenwashing?
Great question. I did. It makes me laugh, and I'm not afraid to address it openly. Even if and in most of the cases, the person that is feeding you this greenwashing information is honestly, sincerely not aware that this is a
Really?
pure greenwashing. They're like, but we do this recycling, and so in their minds, let's take recycling as an example. In their mind, we can produce as much waste as we want, as long we are recycling. Look, we're cool, we're green. And you're like, no, you have to completely change your production cycle to not produce that waste in the first place, and then you can have recycling as your kind of little medal, little merit. We did this.
Mm-hmm.
So in most of the cases, they are openly unaware, and when you gently make them aware, it takes a little bit of education efforts. The situation changes, but you have to make to put a line between what's real and what's wishful thinking.
Right.
So in that case, that recycling effort, yeah, I know it sounds nice, it's something that you can put on your sustainability report at the end of the year, but have you tried to try something different? And yeah, it was as well my job to introduce those different approaches as well, and suggest what else is possible.
Right. And that was going to be my next question of, if they're unaware, What are your approaches to educating those organizations?
Well, when I used to work at the bank, which is not any longer the case, now I shifted to my own consultancy to because I realized that I can serve more businesses like that rather than hitting my head against the wall. What I would do when I was at the bank, there was a great possibility to create, to say, for example, you're building that. Let's take a very basic example. You're building the solar farm, and I want you to comply with this standards. So you need to have enough, I don't know, water for the workers. The workers need to know how they can address their grievances. The workers need to have, basic utilities, where to wash their hands, where to use the toilet, and where to warm up their food if they're working in winter times. And sometimes the business owner would come out and say, but I don't have money for that. I want the basic stuff will be there, but I don't have the resource. I don't have the money to create them very, very decent conditions. Then as a bank, it was our job to suggest, okay, we will give you this money as an additional kind of side loan so that you are able to comply with our policy and our standards. And that is a smart move. It almost doesn't cost them anything on top of that loan. Why is that important? And why the policies on environmental and social responsibility are even on the table? It's because the banks that have those policies usually have smaller percentage that the business owner will have to pay on top of the loan, versus the banks that don't have anything. Well, the banks realize that it's an additional headache. We all know that it's an additional thing to think about, to introduce, to take care of. But for that, you pay with lesser money. Other banks, regular banks, say, sure, no problem, come. You don't have to comply with anything except these basic 4 or 5 requirements. And environment is not there at all. But then you also have more to pay on top of your loan buddy. So they are torn between the two. Either you go and do things as they should be done and you save a little bit of money, or no one cares, but you will have to pay a bit more or a lot more. So this is why some of them choose to go after, okay, let's do it, let's take this loan, pay smaller amount of percentage on top of it, and take a side loan. Now that the side loan, that is again to be able to comply with those environmental and social aspects, policies, standards. Now, what I do in my when I'm consulting, I love to educate, even though I understand this is not why they call me and why they want to work with me. Yet there is a big difference on how you say it and what you say. I had a coworker that every time she was, a lot older, a lot more experienced, and every time the client would ask her something, and I was there, she would make this face that instantly makes you embarrassed of even asking. But the reason of the question is because you don't know. But she would make this face like, really? You don't know? Oh my God, I cannot believe it. Well, this is not the way to explain afterwards your point. And you can be in any industry. If the dentist speaks to me like that, I'll be like, oh, is it really so hard? Yes, I acknowledge I didn't study anatomy, I didn't study dentistry, and this is why I'm here with you, paying you the money, so you explain to me and you help me understand. Some don't want to understand anything on top of their little, sphere of expertise, and that's fine too. But if you have the question addressed to you, be kind, be open, be polite, at least, communicate. That's all. Communicate respectively. So when these questions are addressed to me, I always remember that face, like, really? I cannot believe you don't know it. So I do the completely opposite. Oh my God, you want to learn more? I have the podcast episode. Oh, listen to that. Not to overwhelm them, but of course I give like a little bit of information, very digestible terms. What else I found works really well is that when you educate, so I'm a consultant, I'm not part of the company, I'm by the side of the company. But when you help the in-house staff to understand some things, to experiment with those things and templates and I don't know the standards, and you speak with them, you go hand in hand with them, and then they're able to perform certain things alone by themselves. It works miracles on the business owners, and they're like, oh, thank you for taking care of that person, which also shows that I'm not, me as a consultant, as an external person that is paid separately, I'm not milking them in that, sense. I'm helping them to stand on their feet and to continue autonomously, independently. That I'm not making it look like, you will need me always now. No. And this is when they really start seeing it, engaging, asking more for more information. And I simply love it. I love it. I also believe that, if little by little, step by step, we give this information, we all learn to work in a more sustainable manner, we all learn a little bit of more eco-friendly ways to live, like that, we collectively will change. And that's my big dream.
Great, I thank you for that. So based on everything we talked about, how, in your opinion, how would this be tied back to the fashion industry?
Fashion industry would benefit so much from introducing the standards. So what I use in my work, very tangible, is a set of IFC performance standards. There are 8 standards, starting from the environmental and social kind of organization in the company, to labor standards, to biodiversity, to cultural heritage, and so on. So there are 8 of them. And they are so universal and so standardized, because they are standards, they are called standards for a reason, that you can apply them anywhere in the world. Say you were doing something in Egypt and I'm doing something in Ukraine, we can both apply it on where we are. Fashion industry can have a look at those standards as well, have a look at the what is it called, International Labor Organization set of standards, and start introducing them. Uh, in my field right now, there must be some kind of external money, so external bank that comes and says, here is what I want you to do. If you want to take my money, you will still have to return the money, but I want you to act in a certain manner. The sooner we all start to apply, at least step by step, experimenting with introducing those standards and those sustainability perks and tips a little bit, step by step, day after day, not everything right now all together, the better we will all be in the long term. But fashion industry, I don't see a lot of differences with any other industry, And my podcast is the example of that, of how sustainability can manifest itself, how you can implement certain practices regardless of where you are. Sustainable finance, fashion, flowers, and then you name it. So many topics.
That was the answer I hoped that you were going to share, because all of this is transferable. Regardless of
Yeah.
the industry, it's transferable to everyone. It's transferable around the world. So Anna, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and just share your knowledge with us. Where
Thank
where can
you.
where can everybody find you?
Well, I have a website called annachashchyna.com. You can as well find me with the same name on LinkedIn. This is my most preferred means of communication, LinkedIn and LinkedIn messages. This is where I share all of my work.
All right, perfect. Yeah, and we'll spell that last name out for everyone. So
Oh yeah.
we'll get the website and a LinkedIn and a direct LinkedIn link for this recording. Once again, Anna, thank you. It's been a pleasure. And until next time.
Thank you, Justin.
All
Ciao,
right,
ciao.